Hello, and welcome to Scratch Paper, a writing-related podcast. I'm Alicia de los Reyes, and this is episode 23. So in today's episode, I'm going to do a really fun lesson, I hope you find it fun, called 4 Ways to Use Tarot to Write Fiction. And it's about how I've been using tarot cards to help me with this particular novel that I've been working on. But first, I'm going to give you guys a writing and a reading update as usual. And I also want to say thank you for listening. If you are a new listener, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy the show. You can find all of the shows on aliciadelosreyes.com. All the show notes are there too. And you can also follow me on Instagram or on Twitter. I'm at LikesOatmeal. And if you've been listening, thank you so much for tuning in. I took a short break. I think I mentioned this on Instagram. That's the best place to follow me if you want to keep up with what I'm doing. And I needed to take a break both to finish some writing and get some much needed family time. So that was really nice. We had visitors. My husband just finished grad school. Very exciting for everybody. I'm really proud of him, and we all needed a break. But I'm happy to be back and podcasting once more. So writing and reading update. Writing wise, I actually have gotten a lot of writing done. 2 days ago, I got to go on a whole day of writing, mini writing retreat. And I followed the basic plan from my guide, DIY Writing Retreat, which you can get on Amazon or on Etsy. You can find that all on my website. And I went away just to a different neighborhood. It was East Capitol Hill, which is a really cool part of Seattle. Lots of coffee shops and pretty views. There's a beautiful park called Volunteer Park. And even though it's kind of chilly out, I wrote at coffee shops and at the park, and it was wonderful. I'm up to page 155 of my current novel, which is called, tentatively, working title, Wait. And it's the one that's about a psychic named Leah who is trying to help an evangelical family whose foster daughter has stopped talking. So I feel like I'm almost done with that. The end seems to be in sight, and it seems like a plausible ending to me, so that's good. And yeah, I'm looking forward to setting it aside and then eventually revising it. Reading wise, I've read 2 really good books. The first was The Art of Asking, which I also talked about on Instagram. I did kind of like a mini review on there. It's by Amanda Palmer, who is half of the Dresden Dolls, which is a punk cabaret musical duo. Very weird music, very different. And Amanda Palmer is also very interesting and different. It's based on her TED Talk, which I actually haven't seen. And I thought that it was more of like a handbook, a how-to guide, because the places that I'd seen it recommended were kind of like small business advice type places. But it was really more of a memoir, and it taught me how different Amanda Palmer is from me. And it also kind of like opened my eyes to the possibilities of art, because Amanda Palmer's art really is her connection with other people. It really is like this asking her community to support her. So her model is really interesting. All her music is pay what you want, so you could download it all for free if you wanted. And she does a lot of Kickstarter campaigns and is on Patreon and things like that. So anyway, very interesting read, especially if you're trying to make a living as a creative. It's also the second memoir by a musician that I've read that I really enjoyed. The other one was Hunger Makes Me a Modern Girl by Carrie Brownstein. And I really like memoirs by musicians, I guess. They're just kind of like a different way of thinking about memory and organizing their lives. So I find it fascinating. The other book I read was called Fortune's Rocks by Anita Shreve, which I've never read anything by Anita Shreve before. And I got this book, I think the back of the cover said it was a love affair between a young woman and an older man. And when I started reading it, I realized it was a love affair between a 15-year-old woman and a 41-year-old man. And I thought, well, there's no way I'm going to make it through this whole thing. It's too weird, but I couldn't stop, and I absolutely loved it, and I highly recommend it. And the most interesting thing to me about that book was it was written in third person, I think omniscient. There's a lot of just kind of like declarative sentences like, Olympia did this. The main character's name is Olympia, which I also loved. Olympia did that. And so I thought that that was also going to wear on me, but it's a really long book and I couldn't put it down. Like I said, the third person omniscient did not wear on me, and I was totally sucked in. And I think Olympia, forget her, Olympia Biddeford is one of the coolest characters I've ever read about. Highly recommend it. Okay. So now let me get into today's lesson, which I hope you will enjoy, called using 4 ways to use tarot to write fiction. And I realized when I was coming up with the title, I don't know if there's a way to use tarot to write nonfiction, because the way that I use it is to make up stuff to decide what I will make up next. So, but if there is some way that you use tarot to write nonfiction, I would love to hear about it. You can comment in the show notes or tag me on Twitter or Instagram. Okay, so first, in case you don't know what tarot cards are a deck of cards that people use to like ask questions or answer questions, and do readings. And a lot of times there will be a person doing a reading for another person. But you can also just do readings on your own for yourself. And you can read about tarot all over the place online, of course, but just to give you a quick background, the deck has 22 cards that are part of this thing called, yes, that's right, 22, called the Major Arcana. And those are the cards that I use to use the most in writing my novel. So what the Major Arcana are is kind of like a archetypal narrative, like the hero's journey, which maybe you learned about in high school. If you went to school in the US, that's what I remember learning about the most. So it's this journey through like life and spiritual enlightenment. And to give you an example, the very first card is card 0, the Fool. And it shows, the symbolism includes like this young person embarking on a journey. So the cards themselves have little scenes on them, and the scenes are always full of different symbols. So the Fool has both this image of a young person going on a journey. It also has a baby who's facing away from us, who's like getting too close to a fire, and the baby's mother is like coming after the baby to try and stop it. There's a sun, flowers, some birds, and like a path that goes up over a cliff with different forks. So all of this kind of goes together to make one scene, but it also has like many different little pieces that you can look at and think about when you do a reading. So the Major Arcana kind of illustrates this journey, and it includes like both positive and negative moments. Like the Wheel of Fortune is kind of like this chaos card where anything can happen. But there's also cards like the Lovers, which you could imagine includes 2 lovers on it, and it's about like romance or meeting the right person, embarking on some kind of great friendship or love affair. And the idea, I think, is that you just kind of are always on some part of the Major Arcana. Like when you get to the end, you just start over at the beginning. So that is one part of the deck. The other part of the deck is there's 4 suits of cards, just like in a regular deck of cards. And in my deck, they are the Rods, Cauldrons, Swords, and Pentacles. And my deck is called the Tarot of the Old Path, and it's a female-oriented path. So a lot of like goddess symbolism and symbols from Wicca. The Old Path is supposed to be like Wicca, but I interpret it as like goddess, female worship oriented. So these 4 suits are kind of like, they offer the answers to maybe like smaller questions, like questions about money or conflicts at work or at home, like day-to-day things. That's just my very beginner's interpretation of how all these cards fit together. And when you do a reading, you shuffle all the cards together. You don't like separate out the Major Arcana or anything like that, though I guess you could. And to do a reading, usually people just shuffle up the deck really well and then ask a question. And the question has to be something kind of open-ended because these cards are very open-ended. You can't be like, will I get this new job that I really want? But you can ask something like, what does my future hold career-wise, things like that. Or like, what should I be paying attention to? So you shuffle up the cards and then you can either like spread them out and just pick one, or you can pick the top three and do kind of a simple spread. Or you can do these more complicated spreads, which I have actually never done. And there's all different kinds of spreads that will answer different parts of your question and tell you what questions to ask next, or what card to start with next for your, like, it can get very complicated. But I usually just do simple ones, picking one card or picking 3 cards. And the 2 3-card spreads that I have picked are past, present, future. So one card to symbolize the past of this particular issue, one to symbolize the present, and one to tell you about the future. Or another one that's very similar is present, future, path. So one to tell you about the present, like state of affairs with this issue, one to tell you about the future, and then the path card, which tells you like how you'll get from the present to the future. So those are 2 really simple spreads and ways of picking cards. And that is pretty much all the things that I know about reading tarot. I'm not like an expert or anything like that. But I thought I would tell you how, in particular, I use tarot to write this novel that I'm working on. Because even though the novel happens to be kind of tarot oriented, like the psychic who is the main character, she does tarot readings. I realized that you can use it for, I could use this in other work too, like other unrelated writing. And it's also really fun to do. So I guess I'll just get started. So there's 4 main ways that I use these tarot cards, or that I've thought of using them. And I think I've done 3 of them. So the first way is to use the major arcana cards to make an outline for your novel, to help you make an outline for your novel or your story. So like I said, the major arcana kind of spell out this narrative, and you could lay out the cards and look at them as you're creating a plot for your story. So you start with a Fool, and maybe your first chapter, or your first few pages are about your main character embarking on a journey. And then the next card is Magician, and maybe the character comes across a magician, or a metaphorical magician, somebody who helps them to get started, or maybe they acquire some kind of knowledge or tool or power, something that they need on their journey. So this is like a very vague outline, but you can make it as specific as you want, and you could interpret the cards in as many different ways as you want. So it doesn't have to be like just the stages of a person's spiritual development. It could be a person, the card could represent a person that they come across, or a challenge that they come across, something that they need to face. And so it can help you set up a plot that has like a lot of change and like different things happening in your plot. I think sometimes it's easy to come up with a premise of a book, but it's not always easy to figure out the specifics. And I think that outlining using the major arcana could help with that. So the way that I set up my novel, I decided to follow the major arcana, and I made each chapter after one of the cards. So chapter 0 is the Fool, and I'm up to chapter 14, I think. 13, the Close, which is about a death. And I didn't stick to it like the main character, Leah, the psychic. She's not necessarily, she is in some way in each stage as she goes through it. Like each chapter she is supposed to be like the Fool and then kind of like the Magician. But sometimes I also interpreted the cards to be like another character in the story. And I also used it metaphorically. So like nobody's actually going to die in chapter 13, which is about the Close, which is about death. But there will be kind of like a spiritual death or an emotional death. Yeah. So I hope that makes sense. You can use it as like an outline, just like if you were thinking about using the hero's journey to construct a story. This is another narrative you could follow. The second way that I used it is, well, this is the only way I haven't actually used it, would be to brainstorm as you go along. So I always make an outline ahead of time, but you could just not make an outline. Like if you're a pantser, like I've seen online, people who don't use outlines, then you could just draw a random card as you go to write a scene and make up something based on that. So I think that would be really fun. And you wouldn't have to stick to just the major arcana, or you could say like, oh, what stage am I at now? Because the major arcana, you don't have to go in order. Like life doesn't necessarily work in order, right? Because things happen unexpectedly all the time and they push us forward or pull us back. And so, yeah, you could follow it out of order randomly. You could shuffle up the entire deck and pick a card to write your next scene or your next chapter. And I think that would be a really fun way to construct a novel or a story. The third way that I've used these cards is as inspiration for setting or smaller things or details. So like I mentioned, every card has a lot of different symbols on it, especially the major arcana ones, at least in my deck. So I just drew the card for the lovers, and there's, in addition to a pair of like lovers, there are a lot of flowers. There's a full sun at the top, like a circle that's really bright sun at the top. There's white doves. There's a tree with lots of different kinds of fruit on it. There's bluebells. I think that's a type of flower that's all over. They're making like daisy chains, and there's this kind of angel figure with a symbol on its chest that looks kind of like triangles and a Star of David combined. So there's all these different symbols on there. And so one thing that I think is really fun to do is when I get stuck on something, like I need to figure out some detail in my chapter, I will go look at the card. So that is my favorite way, I think, to use it, because it's just like fun to randomize it. So if I were writing the lovers chapter and I needed them to eat something, I might pick one of the fruits from the tree here. Like there's pears and cherries and grapes. I might set it somewhere where there's these types of flowers, or I might make it daytime instead of nighttime, just like little things. And you can find tons and tons of symbols on here, and you can interpret them any way you want. So you don't have to use like literal fruit. I don't know. You could make it fit for your story. So I think of that as the answer to every question. Like when I have a question, I will go to this card. You could also draw a random card and go to that for the answer to every question. I hope this phrasing makes sense, the answer to every question. I realized it came from when I was planning my wedding and someone asked me, do I have a theme for it? And I was like, well, no, but if there were a theme, it would be flowers. So like, the way that I did it was I was like, if we have any questions, the answer is flowers. Like, what are we going to decorate the tables with? Flowers. What should we put on the invitations? Flowers. What should we put on the menus? Flowers. What should be the like favor? It was flower seeds. So that's what I mean by like the answer to every question. You would just pick up your card and say, well, the answer is this card. So you would look at your card and find an answer to your question. I hope that makes sense. It's a fun way to think, at least I think. A fun way to plan things. Okay, so then the last way that I've used it is to just do actual readings for the novel. So my main character happens to be a psychic who does tarot readings. So whenever she does a reading for someone, whether it's herself or a client, I just shuffle up the cards and pretend that I am her, and I do the reading. So it's really fun to do this. My favorite instance of doing it is I had Leah, she's the main character. She drops all the cards by accident of her deck, and some of them flip up, and she realizes, at first she's like, oh, like hurrying to pick them up, and then she realizes this could be her reading. So she starts looking at the cards. So I did the same thing. I just shuffled up the cards and kind of chucked some on the table and picked the ones that flipped up. I think I flipped over a few random ones, and I made that her like reading, her accidental reading. But let's say you don't have a main character or any character who's doing tarot card readings. You could also just do readings for your character. Like, let's say your character is at an impasse or a difficult moment and they don't know what to do. You could do a past, present, future reading for them, and that 3-card spread kind of forms a narrative. Whether you pick cards for the major arcana or for from the rest of the other 4 suits, they're all like they form a story together when you lay them out in that kind of 3-card spread. And like I said, there's more complicated spreads you could do too. So you could do spreads to learn about your character, their motivations, their desires, their future. You could also do spreads for draw 1 card for a question like, what's going to happen next to my character? Or like, what does my character care most about? So I think that would be a really fun way to answer questions for plot and for like character development. And I would be curious to hear if there are other questions that you guys can think of or that you've used maybe to kind of like explore plot or character in your stories. Because you could ask those questions of the tarot deck, and it's a really fun way to come up with answers. So yeah, just to conclude and recap, the main reason that I like doing this is because it's fun and different. It's like a fun way to pick random things that you need to put in your stories. It's, I think, like a good tool for making stuff up because, like if you don't have to believe in this particular aspect of tarot cards, but I do. I think that they're like a tool for introspection, and that you see in the card the thing that you actually want to create or write. So like, even though it might seem like you're getting these symbols and ideas from the cards themselves, I think that in some way they're tapping into your kind of like intuition, your inner knowledge. And so I don't feel like it's cheating or anything like that, but even if it is, it's a really fun way to write. And I would love to hear if you have written using tarot cards or made other creative decisions using tarot cards. I saw somebody on Instagram who used them to draw, like make paintings or drawing decisions. It was Amy Is Not Dead Yet is her handle. And I thought that was really neat. So, but yeah, I would love to hear if you use tarot or if you are thinking about it. I will put links to everything I mentioned, including like my tarot deck, and on my show notes, which are at aliciadelosreyes.com. You can also follow me on Twitter or Instagram, Likes Oatmeal. And yeah, looking forward to getting back into podcasting. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great week.